screen. So.
Okay, so I'm gonna. Oh, it says going live. So I'm going live now.
Okay.
It says I'm live, but it also says an
Yes,
error
it's
occurred.
live on your home page. Yeah.
All right.
And
Well, either way, we are recording. So
it says it's scheduled for 8:45. So maybe it's on a timer, and we've got 3 minutes until it actually goes. Because I've got a thing that says set reminder on.
fine. Well, in that case, should we just start anyway? And
Well, it's. I guess in the title, they're the things that you want to have a chat about. Is that right?
yeah, I wanted to get on my high horse about a couple of topics.
Okay. Well, look, it's coming out my end now, so it is actually on screen. So
The stream is happening.
yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm slightly disappointed. I wished to have been regarded as more of a security threat by the people at the New York Stock Exchange and Alphabet Investor Relations. I mean, I'd like to think that they've got their little chat room saying Ranjan and Roger are just logging on, watch the stock price.
I'm sure they're blocking us, Ranjan. We're allowed to do this together, and we're labouring under the impression that people can look, but I'm sure it's blocked.
Oh, I like it. That's very clever. So we're having our reality shaped for us. Interesting.
Yes, yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, I like that. Real-time hedging from the naughty people. Okay, so
If
I've
you look,
decided to get on my high
out,
horse.
yeah,
What's that, Rod?
it says on the counter one watching now. So
Yeah, I think
I
that's
assume
me.
that's me. Or is it you? Are you watching? Have you got it running
I
as
do have
well?
it running. I do have it running, yeah.
Oh, well, it's odd it doesn't say two then if you're watching it as well. I suppose it doesn't count your own views. Hmm.
Well, yeah, I'm sorry about the light, everybody. I've adjusted this for a dark room. Might be able to do something about
Yeah,
that.
it's looking good. And it's at 480. Yeah, very good. Very nice, Ranjan.
All right, good. Yeah, looking a bit more human. I was looking a bit pale there. Okay. Right. So, high horse, my high horse. I'm going to get on my high horse. Is that cool?
Yeah, you go for it.
Believe it or not, Roger, I haven't even had a coffee yet today.
Really? Oh, wow. That's dedication.
Well, I mean, what I'm saying is I'm getting on my high horse. Right. So, it would appear, and I know you've got your own theories on this one, but I was thinking about writing a blog post today, which,
Hmm.
as you probably know, things have to be pretty bad before I write a blog post. I mean, there has to
Yeah.
be no coverage of my point of view at all.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, I would have started my blog post like this. There is a Richard Murphy tweet from yesterday where he says, okay, Williamson is gone, so now let us start a police investigation based on the breaching of the official secret man into both Williamson and the Daily Telegraph, who published it. And I
Hmm.
thought, brilliant. It's that's brilliant in so many different ways. I mean, I'm not going to go into it, but I mean, on the one hand, you've got press freedom and the freedom to print anything you wish within the national interest. The other one, the official secret. The other one, the blah blah blah. Okay, and so of course the thing that's being forgotten about in all of this is is it in the UK's best interest for Huawei to have these contracts? And what's Trump saying? For example, Trump seems pretty against it. So I then thought, hold on a second. WikiLeaks, Julian Assange. Assange. Yesterday he was given 50 weeks, which is essentially them throwing the book at him for skipping bail. And I think in about an hour's time, just up the road here, we're going to have the extradition hearing start. I think at about 10 o'clock at Westminster Magistrates Court. So I might when we're done here, recharge my camera battery and go up there and see if I can get a couple of images amongst the scrum, Roger.
Yeah.
Then I was thinking, okay, so he's back. Is Williamson a whistleblower? Obviously, we've got this whole Sidwell thing. And the Telegraph published the story on the morning of the 24th, probably during the 23rd. And so the Telegraph are quite clearly taking the position by publishing the story at least, that there's a difference of opinion in the cabinet, and not everybody thinks that May is correct in publishing her opinion and giving Huawei the contract. But what have the State Department said? And is Williamson, in fact, really acting on behalf of the State Department? In which case, Sidwell would be representing the kind of, I mean, what do you want to call it? The EU Chinese oligarchy. I mean, it's the city, really, isn't it? Because the city benefit from China. And the understanding is that she basically turns around and said to Cameron and May and people like that, if you don't accept my Huawei stuff, then no Chinese money will come to the UK. That type of thing. It's also interesting to me that on the day that the Huawei Gavin Williamson story came out, that was the same day that I think the Brexit Party kind of launched, and Matt Hancock was launching this policy about getting rid of non-disclosure agreements in the NHS. So yeah, I think Hinkley Point is the other big Chinese project, which is already going ahead. But apparently when it comes to all this nuclear stuff, in general, I think in the UK, a lot of people have done their calculations and they're all falling out. So, yeah. You then have this woman, what's her name? Penny Mordaunt, taking over as the Defence Secretary. She was in charge of George W. Bush's foreign press corps when he got elected in 2000. She's currently the Minister for International Development. Moving on. She probably will retain her. I love this. She's going to be the Minister for. She's still the Minister for Equality, which means overseeing women and probably LGBTQ plus and BAM. Which I think is quite funny, given that she seems to be. I think she probably hates women and all people. And speaking of women, I've noticed that there is an athlete who has won the 800 meters in the Olympics a few times, who has been stripped of her gender by the International Athletics Federation. They basically said you can no longer compete as a woman because your testosterone level is too high. So I thought, that kind of reminds me of when they stripped. We may have different views on this, but I didn't think Shamima Begum should have been stripped of her nationality at all. She should have been brought back here, as she wanted to come back here. I thought she should have been brought back here. So now we're in the era of stripping people of their gender, stripping them of their nationality, etc. So there you are, a little bit of a flourish at the end. Thank you so much for listening to me. At some stage, I will head off and see if I can get involved with the scrum outside the court, aka extradition hearing for Julian Assange.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts, Roger?
Well, that's a lot of stuff, Ranjan.
I know that you're on this. So.
Yeah, it's to know whether to start with Assange or whether to start with Williamson. And, I mean, they are loosely connected. Assange is accused of leaking sensitive security information. That's why the Americans want him. for putting operatives at risk or whatever. And Williamson is accused of effectively breaking the Official Secrets Act. I watched earlier quite a lengthy report that was on Channel 4 News last night. And at the end of that, they interviewed Dr. Julian Lewis, who's the Conservative MP for the New Forest. And he is actually on the Security Oversight Committee. So I watched a long interview of that Security Committee of Sidwell, the head of the Civil Service, the head of the National Security Council. And Sidwell was basically has explained at various times. There are quite a lot of these interviews online that you can look at. And he was explaining something called the fusion doctrine, which is kind of like, you know, there used to be this thing about joined up government. It's kind of like joined up security. And that is all to do with this EU military unification at the moment. Okay, so put that to one side and remember that. What Julian Lewis actually said about Gavin Williamson was there's a distinction between a political leak and a security leak. And what he was saying, quite strongly it seemed to me, is that what Williamson actually did, or is accused of, is a political leak and not a security leak. Now, Tom Watson was interviewed in the same segment separately, and he was sort of saying, well, obviously the guy has the opportunity to clear his name, but people can't be placed above the law. If he has in fact breached the Official Secrets Act, then obviously that's a criminal matter, and there would need to be a criminal investigation and then a criminal trial. And of course, that due process is something which I think Assange isn't being afforded. So it actually being given due process under law in the UK at the moment is obviously something which Tom Watson, an elite politician, believes should apply to other elite politicians. But it would be interesting to see what Tom Watson had to say about Julian Assange and this extradition, because there hasn't been much coverage of that. So then put those all to one side, and they're sort of like political and security questions. And then let's look at Huawei and what is that? What is 5G? What is it exactly? And again, this is something which is very much off-stream, non-mainstream. There is quite a lot of information about these very short microwaves that 5G uses, and there are medical concerns about the effect of those very short wavelength. I think they're 1 millimeter microwaves or something, or nanometer microwaves, and they have profound effects on human health. And in many of the test installations in the United States and all the rest of it, these types of microwaves have actually been weaponized. There are weapons which are used for what they call domestic crowd control and things like this. And you can go to the United States, you can buy these off American arms manufacturers. So the microwaves affect our brain waves, and they affect basically our physiology. Now,
domestic crowd control. Could you go into that? Are you talking about facial recognition?
No, not at all. What I'm talking about is it's used as, instead of rubber bullets, you fire basically a laser, which is basically these microwaves, at your target, and it will make them feel sick, it will make them disoriented, and basically disable them. It's kind of like a taser, without the wires attached.
A taser without the wires. So does that mean that you
I mean,
you can zap anyone?
All I would say about all of that stuff is if you do a couple of clicks on the internet, you will find this stuff. And there are lots of very long lectures. There are lots of people and pressure groups opposing this stuff, but they are real pressure groups outside of the NGO complex, because obviously the NGO complex doesn't complain about this sort of stuff. Like, it would be interesting, you know, I haven't seen a single person at Extinction Rebellion mention 5G, for instance. And a lot of the cutting down of trees in urban areas is to assess 5Gs, because the thing about 5G and these very short wavelength microwaves is they will not pass through solid objects like trees. And so to roll out this technology, okay, regardless of who's supplying it, whether it's Huawei and all the rest of it, to roll this stuff out in urban areas, and it's basically to map urban areas, you've got to chop down trees and things, because it gets in the way of there are lots basically there are lots of transmitters which create a network, and they all have to basically communicate with each other, and then they send back to a central computer processor all that different information, which then gets put together, and it can provide mapping. You know, it can do face recognition and all this sort of thing. But it's basically a distributed network of microwave transmitters, which, when all that data is brought back to the central processing unit, it can be processed in various ways, and various algorithms can interrogate the data coming back to identify threats or retail opportunities. So in a shopping centre, for instance, it will allow, you know, basically almost mind reading. You know, like there are various apps will, like Siri. Oh, Gavin Williamson. Do you remember? Remember when Gavin Williamson? This is important. I just want to make this point. Do you remember when Gavin Williamson stood up the dispatch box and his Siri went off on his mobile phone? You know, well, that's a security threat. But Siri and those sorts of technologies will be enabled with steroids by the 5G network. And so it's a spying thing. The benefit is absolutely marginal to consumers, but it's very, very, very helpful to the surveillance state. And that's what it's for.
Roger. Okay, so Roger, to clarify, the Huawei story is in fact a surveillance capitalism story, masquerading
Yes,
as if it's a kind of
a trade war story. It's not. It's wrapped up in the whole trade war thing, but that's basically a great game geopolitical wrestling match, which has been going on for years. There's the BRICS Development Bank, which is now called the New Development Bank or something, has been going along quite nicely. As yet, it's still to be unmolested, and of course, Britain really upset the Americans by becoming a partner, or you know, in that bank, right?
I've never heard of it.
You have never heard of it? Oh, well, it used to be called the BRICS Bank, and now it's called the Development Bank, and it's outside of the IBS and the existing central bank. The BRICS: Brazil, Russia, India, China. So basically the non-aligned states, and Iran and things like that. And so there's the BRICS Bank.
Is it 20 of them? Is it 20 of them?
Well, you'll have to go on their website, because it's been going for about 3 or 4 years now, and it's become reasonably well established and has made some very large development loans into the world economy. I can tell you something who'd be very aware of it is Penny Mordaunt, who's International Development Secretary, because international development and international finance and IMF liberalisation regimes put into economies, not least Assange as well. We see Assange with this. Ecuador recently had a huge IMF loan. Julian Assange.
Okay, no, not IMF.
Not through BRICS, no,
Yeah.
not through BRICS. But international development and international aid, okay, is basically run by spooks. It's not run by bankers and for commerce. The game is to control access to resources, yeah? And the way that's done is through the financial system and through the money system. I mean, there's nothing controversial in that. I mean, anyone that's been paying attention, and have you read the book Confessions of an International Hitman?
I've heard a lot about it. John Perkins.
Well, I mean, it's been out for years now. Yeah. So that stuff is real. I mean, you can go on the World Bank website and you can read lots of vox pops of all of, with all of the key characters in all of these things, going all the way back to the 70s and the development of the neoliberal financialization project. I mean, it's all there. They're all quite proud of it and want to talk about it. You see, it doesn't get in the newspapers, but they're all sort of they're like dogs pissing on lampposts. Setting out, I did this bit.
Okay.
So it's with all of this stuff at the moment, and the Gavin Williamson thing is very, very important because what it shows is the dynamic of power between a lame duck zombie prime minister, Theresa May, and an ascendant, an extremely powerful, technocratic civil servant who is actually a spy. This is Sidwell. And of course, his relationship with May goes back to her appointment as Home Secretary in 2010 by Cameron, but it goes back all the way to Robin Cook and Jack Straw and their illegal, war, and also in terms of the Chilcot report. You've got to study Sidwell and look. I mean, I noticed his hard talk on the BBC has been pulled off. You can't get it anywhere at the moment.
Really?
He did a hard talk in 2010 when he was the British ambassador to Afghanistan, which he became after he was the NATO High Representative in Afghanistan for NATO. So he is a creature of NATO, and that means he's a Stoltenberg guy and he's a Mogherini guy. That's him. Now,
who's the first guy? Who's Stoltenberg?
He's Secretary General of NATO.
Right.
Yeah. So effectively, what you have is the dynamic here is you've got Williamson, who, as you've said, is he the State Department? Well, the State Department is divided on this stuff too, you see. Like Obama did the Iran deal, okay, and Trump opposes the Iran deal. The Iran deal upset the neocons and Israel, and the current move to war against Iran, which is happening, all the maneuvers are going on, all the assets are being put in place. The Straits of Hormuz are currently now being shut down, which will cause a world recession. And then also, at the same time, you've also got the USA providing, in effect, air support now for this attempted coup in Venezuela. And they've been trying to get the Venezuelan, they've been doing what they did and have been doing in South America for a long time, but what they've been doing more recently in North Africa and Syria, Middle East, Egypt, etc. So, and this dynamic is complicated by, in the Middle East, US interests and Saudi interests, but there are also Russian interests there, Turkish interests. And of course, Turkey are a member of NATO, but Turkey have effectively gone over to the Russian and kind of Iranian side of things, really. And it is horrendously complicated.
Guess what I heard about
I don't know. What did you hear about Iran the other day?
Well, because I mean, I know you've been telling me about the importance of Iran. I mean, I think the official reason for Huawei being on the naughty list in the US is they do business with them. I know ZTE were on the naughty list.
It's actually more than that. It isn't about it's not about the business. It's not even about the back doors. Although it's more about the back doors and the business, because everybody knows it's no longer a suspicion because of the Vault 7 leaks. I was reading a bunch of stuff the other day about this stuff. And the thing about it is that what the USA is trying to turn itself into the Byzantine Empire, right? Okay. What we've been going through is kind of a splitting of a re-splitting of the Roman Empire into the Eastern and the Western Roman Empires. Okay. And what then happened is the Byzantians, the way they ran then the Western, what was the Western Roman Empire, no, the Eastern Roman Empire, which became the Byzantine Empire. It was run by various vassal states and things, and of course that all came to an end at the end of the First World War. You know, Gallipoli and all of that, and Turkey were aligned with the Axis powers, with Germany, Austro-Hungary, and then when they all lost, you had the Treaty of Versailles, which did lead directly then into the Second World War. But what I think American foreign policy is looking to now is to control the access to resources for their potential competitors, but via satellite vassal things. And the EU are lined up to be one of these vassal, like almost a vassal empire, okay? And the quid pro quo for that, okay, the Americans are saying, well, if you have that, but you can then have Africa as well. And this is Guy Verhofstadt sort of saying, oh, we know Africa's important for us. The German defense minister saying, oh, you know, of course, Africa, we've been interested in doing. Tony Blair, they're all saying it, right? And that's, I mean, it's deeply imperialist and it's deeply racist. I mean, they're basically saying we can run Africa better than you. You know that the franc is still the currency in Mali. You know, in the French. You cracked a joke the other day, didn't you, about Morocco? Was it Morocco or Algiers about the democracy? What was that joke?
My understanding is that the French central bank decides the value of all those currencies. They're all paid.
It does, yeah.
It's all decided in Paris.
Yeah, but do you remember when you said the joke about the coup d'etat?
Oh, what you mean in Algeria? Le Monde called it the coup d'etat démocratique.
Yes, that was it. Yeah. I mean, that perfectly explains what's happening in Venezuela as well at the moment, isn't it? I mean, that's effectively what the BBC is saying.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
And EU for that matter. But so right, let's look at our. We've talked about Sidwell, we've talked about Huawei, we've talked about Williamson. And then you come to Assange and the extradition and how that all fits into it. So what was Assange's great crime? Let's ask this. Was the greater crime the leaks about the Democratic Party, and Hillary Clinton's server, or was it the leaks of the extrajudicial killings, the basically war crimes, the shooting of civilians from attack helicopters in Iraq? You know, so was it the
They were journalists, weren't they? They were Reuters journalists that got murdered.
Well, there've been so many murders. I mean, the famous footage was actually really put out by the Icelandic. She's a poetess and artist who became a politician in Iceland.
You mean Brigadier Jonas?
Yeah, her. She was instrumental in getting that particular WikiLeaks really in the press. Yeah. And I've not seen anything from her for ages. In fact, I must have a look and see what she said.
I met her last year, actually.
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
She was
so it's an interesting question. Was that the greater crime of Assange, or was it the Clinton server thing, which the American establishment, including the neocons, they blame Julian Assange for having Trump instead of Clinton. And, you know, I mean, Assange's father was interviewed the other day, and he did point out, well, she did that all by herself. You know, it wasn't the leaks or anything like that. I mean, all this pretty much. It wasn't even the final nail in the coffin. She was one of the worst candidates in history. In the same way that, you know, Theresa May was an appalling candidate in 2017. One wag said, you know, it looks as if she studied Hillary Clinton's campaign and said, oh, let's do one of those. And hey, it worked again, or didn't work, if you see what I mean. So, so that's an interesting question on the Assange stuff. Of all the stuff that he's done, what is the greater crime? So the extradition is on a non-capital offence, isn't it? The extradition is or what we're told it's based upon. It is you know, something that doesn't carry with it the death penalty. And what everyone's saying is that, well, actually everybody knows that when he gets there will be other charges and there will be a death penalty involved in all likelihood. And there have been lots of weasel words about this, but of course the point is that Ecuador were given money by the international banking system. They were given a loan. That's international development, and that's how it works. So this is another thing that the oligarchy and the financialized part of the oligarchy and the military industrial complex, they're getting less shy about showing how structurally embedded they are in society. You know, when war reporting, embedded reporters and all of that stuff, where they sort of say, well, the press is embedded with the military. Well, actually, what we see now is the security apparatus and the military embedded in the civilian civic society. And it's very clear in terms of climate policies that they're being pushed by the war hawks as much as they are by the finance people. And so people like...
I think what's funny about this is the relative sort of view, because it's one thing for you to take your position from, you know, you're clearly not a major player in politics. And when I say that, I mean, obviously you've got the people with the money, and then you've got their agents who control whatever thing, or, you know, step out the limit. So when it comes to the people who control whatever thing by interpreting what you think, they will have their own range of views within them. Obviously all within a narrow sort of spectrum. But I've had some interaction with somebody who's part of all of that, and it's interesting, some of the people around them say, oh, this guy's really ethical, he's not a hawk, you know, he's just a journalist. But when I hear about the things that concern him, then I realise, okay, to anyone else's eyes, you're kind of reasonable, but you're sort of quite, you know, you talk about threats of war in a certain way, but, you know, the people who you're talking about, they just don't care, they're just going for it. You know?
It
So basically,
seems...
I'm talking about someone who's an embedded
Yeah.
And he would have to portray himself as being fairly mild.
I mean, I know something about embedded reporters because a good friend of mine used to have to bodyguard them in Afghanistan and Iraq. He was quite a senior military officer, but, you know, basically had to wear a gun on his belt and bulletproof vest. And one of the things that he absolutely used to do his head in, you'd have all these star embedded reporters that wouldn't wear their flak jackets, okay? And my friend used to say, you must wear your flak, and he used to get all sorts of trouble. I don't want to, it ruins my, you know, and I don't, whatever. And what he was saying is, look, it's not about your personal safety. If you're not wearing one, you will draw fire, and that endangers my men. So he says, I don't care if you get shot, but I care if my men get shot. Put the fucking thing on. And this is the problem you have with these elitists and people like Gavin Williamson, is they don't understand the danger. Even in these illegal, our people are put in danger, and they are following orders, and what they're asking to be complicit in is a sanitized storytelling of what that war actually is. And I mean, this is the great gift of WikiLeaks to us, because otherwise our view of, say, the Iraq war would have been shock and awe, and all the video of highly targeted weapons, you know, they can go down a flue into a thing, and we only kill the people we want to kill, and totally and utterly the collateral damage that they call it, you know, which is basically killing innocent women and children and elderly people and all the rest of it, the sanitized version to get support from the public for these illegal wars is what needs to come out. But WikiLeaks actually said, well, no, look, here are innocent civilians, women and children being killed by these, you know, supposedly precision weapons. There's no such thing as precision explosion. Once the explosion goes out, you don't know who you're going to kill. This friend of mine actually, I think he resigned his commission in the end and sort of came home, because I don't think it was, you know. And I can tell you lots of stories about other people from the first Gulf War and from the Falklands about all this stuff. It's, you know, it's that old saying about, you know, lions led by donkeys. And sadly, the British establishment still has way more donkeys than worthy leaders.
Yeah, I mean, I think
it's the same.
It's hilarious that someone's being done for leaking. You know, I think what you're talking about, the difference between a political leak and I don't know, a naughty leak. You know, it's like you've got good leak, bad leak.
Well, a national security leak puts national security at risk. Well, this Huawei stuff, I mean, any idiot can work out. Forget about Huawei for now and all the rest of it. And there's a geopolitical program called the Caspian Report, and the Caspian Report do a report on the geopolitics of Sweden. Okay, it was a couple of years ago, and whether Sweden would join Norway, NATO, and whether Finland would do that, and how that all worked. But what it says about these, the threat to Sweden geopolitically rests in its computer system and its cyber security. And Sweden's cyber security is basically in the hands of Israel, because it's basically run by a private Israeli company. Now, and that's what this Caspian report basically says. That is one of the most pressing dangers to Swedish civil society and the security of the Swedish state, is its reliance on computer software and all the rest of it provided by a foreign power, right? Now, clearly, Israel, who are aligned with Washington and all the rest of it, aren't going to want Huawei or whatever treading on their toes, because that industry in Israel is huge, and it's, you know, it just is, and they're really good at it. They make some fantastic music software and stuff, you know, sound processing stuff. I mean, back in the day, I mean, going back to the first Gulf War now, a friend of mine was in the security business, and he was an engineer. He used to go to Israel quite often, actually installing security systems, because we're very good at that too, the British, you know. And so this friend of mine, he was and I remember at the time having business meetings with some. It was basically this Brazilian oligarch bloke. He was a British guy, very sort of strange guy, but he was responsible for importing, you know, the GATSOs, the speed cameras that started flooding into Britain. He knew this friend of mine that did a lot of stuff, and so when all that stuff was happening, you know, I was meeting these guys, and this guy lived in Brazil in an enclosed community and all the rest of it, and I couldn't stand the guy. I really didn't like him. And I said to my friend, you know, what are you mixing with this guy for? I said, you know, he's clearly not a very nice man, you know, by my standards, or even yours, you know, by your standards. I'm surprised you're mixing with him, but he kind of had to, because the firm that he worked for wanted the business. And it was basically pretty shady stuff, you know, and he told her, yeah. I mean, back in another life, I actually advised a Brazilian bank, one of the regional national banks. I actually advised them on moving their headquarters and stuff. That's many moons ago now. But it's, in fact, I employed, thinking about it, I mean, I employed architects who used to do all of the foreign and Commonwealth embassy security and stuff. So, I mean, kind of by osmosis, you kind of pick this stuff up. You know, no one breached any official secrets, but you know, when I was in the data center development business, obviously with a data center, you don't want people to attack it, and so my architects, you know, sort of said, well, look, you know, when you build a security compound for your diplomats you know, you basically use the same stuff to protect a civilian installation, even though these were two things in Docklands, these data centers, you know, hugely valuable things, hugely valuable data. And I don't know. That's the other point about all of this, is that it seems that this, as well as the security state moving into our civil society and what we consider to be our democratic institutions, they are involved very much at a commercial level. I mean, it is fascism. There's no other word for it. The mixing of private capital interests with state security, state military, and state civil institutions. And this is the fusion doctrine.
Roger.
Yeah.
If we go back to
Who are we? Yeah.
then would you say that Gavin Williamson is making a good point by highlighting the dangers wherein
Well, no,
allows
I
Huawei? Are you with Williamson or are you
I'm
with
with
Sidwell?
either of them. I think they're all wrong. They're all wrong. They're just this fractional infighting in the oligarchy, and they're all wrong. There is no right answer.
Hold on, Roger. You can't fudge this.
I'm not fudging it. I'm being quite clear. They are all.
Let me give you the opportunity to attempt to fudge it or answer it, and that is this: Hinkley Point actually more worried about the French than the Chinese, but that's so yeah, Hinkley Point, big security check, no threat, no questions asked. Huawei, similar situation. Should the Huawei deal be going through, yes or no?
I say no, it shouldn't, but we shouldn't be having 5G, is my point. We don't need 5G. 5G is only useful for nefarious purposes. There is no pressing need commercially for 5G at all. Fast internet broadband is absolutely fine, and we're absolutely awash in radio communications anyway, and radiation pollution. I mean, for fuck's sake, it's way more dangerous and hugely more ubiquitous than CO2. I mean, it's crazy. There's a guy called Dr. Graham Downing, and Dr. Graham Downing is a very interesting man, and he gave a talk at the last it's called AV conferences, and I think it was AV9, which is Alternative View 9, and this is a series of conferences that are organized by a chap by the name of Crane, Ian Crane, I think he's called, and these. So he's a well-known anti-fracking. He's a well-known anti-fracking activist, okay, but he's also quite clued up on 5G, right? And Dr. Graham Downing, who's a medical doctor, really clever guy. I mean, he is one hell of a bright spark, this guy. But his talk on 5G is very, very interesting, and what it's for. I mean, he's also done other talks about vaccinations and transhumanism, and things like the singularity, and how the security state see the best way of trolling us plebs going into the future, as by their measures the precariat grows, right, and their perceptions of scarcity. And trying to maintain the levels of control which they currently have and want to consolidate. Okay, but Downing, when he gives his talk about 5G, he recommends an app that you can download. It's a paid-for app, so I didn't download it, but you can see a demo of it. And what this is, on your smartphone, okay, it can pick up radio waves. And it shows where they all are. So, for instance, actually my computer is on a fiber optic link to my router where I sit, but we have got a relay for the wireless broadband. Now, wireless technology is very interesting, and the way the phone network works wirelessly it works as relays in a network, right? And 5G is basically making a network which is much more finely grained, and so the transmitters are much closer together, but they transmit at a frequency, and Dr. Graham Downing goes into all of this stuff in some depth in his talk. And so that's what people should do, is do a search, AV9, Dr. Graham Downing 5G. Now, that's the question that people need to ask about 5G, not whether Gavin Williamson is right, or whether Theresa May is right, or whether Donald Trump is right. That's completely the wrong question, and it's throwing everybody off the scent. Why do they want 5G in the first place, and what will it be used for? Well, it's going to be used for spying. And so one group of spies who don't like the other group of spies, so i.e. our guys are supposed to be wearing the white hat, okay, and they don't want the Russians or the Chinese, who are the guys in the black hats, to be doing this 5G stuff. The real question is, do we want anyone to be doing this stuff? And the answer to that is no. it's not needed, and it's only these guys in the black hats and the white hats that give a shit about having this stuff in the first place. Because it's not for us, it's against us. It's against humanity, and it's against peace and peaceful coexistence and non-coercion and all that stuff. So that's the point there. Wrong questions. And of course, that the press asked the wrong questions about Assange as well. You know, I mean, he obviously did Donald Trump a big favour. I mean, Donald Trump should be pardoning him, really, but the neocons won't let him because, I mean, famously at the time, there was some politician stood up and said, he basically said, well, if give me a gun and I'll put a bullet in his head myself. Talking about extrajudicial killing. So saying this man should be executed. That's what, I mean, that was said on the floor of the American Senate, not the House of Representatives, but actually in the Senate. A senator stood up and said that. You know, I mean, if you look back, you'll find it that it was reported at the time.
All very gung-ho from the Americans.
Well, the Americans accuse everybody else of being a rogue state, but they're the only ones that are really acting as one, you know, and it's deeply troubling. But next in line for rogue state status actually is the UK, and you know, we've got a really bad record of this shit. You know?
Hold on, Roger.
Mm-hmm.
What about the issue of this chap, Mark Sidwell, and the pedo fugitive?
Well, he's the guy that led the inquiry into the Jeffrey Dickinson portfolio going missing, and then also on Theresa May's watch. So you'll find a video, I think it was in 2014 or 2015. He was up in front of that committee, you know, talking about what was happening with all of that. On UK Television, they call him the king. I call him the dictator. He is, at the present time, he is the military dictator of the United Kingdom. The fact that he's, you know, ostensibly a civilian, but he's a spook. I mean, you know, Britain is currently being ruled by, I don't know if it's MI5 or MI6. I suspect he's MI6 because obviously he was in Afghanistan and stuff. So MI6 is currently running the country.
Okay. So in this week's Private Eye, the first story, Sir Humphrey Dumpty. Okay, so it's 4 or 5 paragraphs. Cabinet Secretary Sir Mark Sidwell. I keep on thinking he's called Sidwell. Sidwell. Cabinet Secretary Sir Mark Sidwell promises a thorough inquiry following the leak of National Security Council talks concerning Chinese telecoms group Huawei. But how far will the man who doubles as the head of the civil service and Prime Minister, Theresa May's National Security Advisor, go in embarrassing his political marketing? In his security role, Sir Mark will understand potential damage to performance and trust abroad if he finds anything extremely serious, like a government so riveted in political positioning that cabinet ministers can't keep security secret. Moreover, Sir Mark is nothing if not loyal to May, his boss when he was permanent Secretary of the Home Office, and she was Secretary of State. Just before Huawei thrust him into the spotlight, his work in this role brought unwelcome scrutiny earlier this month from the public and council. Sidwell had to explain why the problems caused by May's hostile environment policies weren't brought up. Why weren't ministers told that by shifting the onus of establishing citizenship rights onto immigrants, a large group that has been living in the UK for decades would be put in sometimes intolerable conditions? The best excuse Sir Mark could give was that we didn't have the analytical capability to do so, and we didn't identify the unintended consequences. This doesn't bode well for the man required to spot national security threats, requiring analytical capability.
I mean, where do you start with that? Really, I mean, it's
Excuses. He's an
well,
excuses.
the thing you've got to understand about him is everything that comes out of his mouth will have multiple meanings on purpose. I mean, the guy's not an idiot. He's obviously a bright bloke. But what he is he's constrained within one particular paranoid worldview that doesn't brook. It's Tina. There is no alternative for these people. Tina, the neoliberal she who must be obeyed. Tina. There is no alternative. And with all of this stuff, the automatons that do it, your Maybots, and this guy who's kind of like Sidwell bot, if you like. But Sidwell bot, Sidwell bot is in charge of Maybot. I mean, that's the way it's wired. The polarity, the direction of command and control isn't the way that it's painted on the tin or that he would admit to. It's the other way. Here is a man who is clearly in charge of this process. And when the last cabinet secretary died, passed away sadly, a month or two back, Sidwell was appointed almost straight away with no interviewing. It wasn't put out or anything like that. He was appointed. Now, was he appointed? Was it?
So Sidwell came in after Jeremy Haywood.
Yeah. Yes. First of all, to cover him when he was off ill, and then obviously when he passed away, he was.
Haywood was famously married to a rampant Remainer, and everybody said that Haywood was himself a Remainer. So what are you saying, that Haywood was bumped off?
No, not at all. No, I'm not saying that at all. I hadn't even entered my head. No, I don't think he was. But what the point is that, and the only point that one needs to know is that Sidwell was appointed, and there wasn't any executive search. It wasn't, there was no question, was it? He was appointed, right? And the only question is, was that May's appointment, or was that appointment made out with our supposed cabinet government? Because he's basically the cabinet secretary too. So he's cabinet secretary, national security advisor, and he's got another role as well, which I think he's got three key roles, which make him the most powerful person. Each one of those roles is the most powerful person in government, but the three together makes him more powerful than any of the politicians. That's the point.
You know what's quite funny about all of this?
What?
So we might be able to ask the government what the interview process was like, and obviously this is a time the truth is very rare to tell. But because I remember when Jim O'Neill, the guy who came up with the term BRICS.
I don't know.
Well, there's the guy from Goldman Sachs who came up with the term BRICS. When you say BRICS countries.
Right.
That was invented in November 2001 by Jim O'Neill. He was the guy. He's
Right.
a Manchester kind of born Goldman Sachs banker, and he eventually was appointed to the cabinet in 2015 when Cameron won the election. And so I think everybody thought that because he had the law of access, he must be Labour.
Appointed to the cabinet. So what is he? An MP?
He was sort of Treasury Secretary. Yeah, they put him in the Lords when they
He's in the Lords. Okay, one of those. Right.
Sort of
Okay.
Treasury Secretary. And Jim O'Neill, he was very much into devolution for cities and talking to China. But
there's a surprise.
I sent an FOI to the Treasury to say, can you tell me about the interview process? Obviously, I always think I'm very clever. Guess what they said?
No idea. What did they do?
They said it's a political appointment, so there's no interview. And I thought, oh, okay. But with Sidwell, surely there'd be a massive bureaucratic process choosing with a load of paper.
Well, apparently not. So the last person with as much power as he has, and he claims with much and probably more, was Gus O'Donnell. And there's another interesting character, who's basically, fully employed the revolving door, and he's on a very nice little number with his consulting firm, the chairman of which, before him, was your friend Hogg's mother. That? Yeah. So, I mean, they're all at it. I mean, it's fascism. It is fascism. There's no, but for real entrepreneurs like me, okay, there is no finance and there is no room at the inn. We're considered to be troublemakers, and people like me that won't go along with this kind of corruption, okay, have been edited out of the process. So
this came up in a meeting. I was at a meeting yesterday, and there was a discussion of the various, shall we say, basically employment rights, and when someone sees something that's bad, what protection they have when they want to talk about it. And then we were talking about people who work in banking.
Mm-hmm. Some difficulty with
Lloyd. There was one.
I mean, I remember a meeting with my bank manager at Lloyd's, and I basically said to him, "Look, you're the insolvent ones. I'm not insolvent, but you are." And he was basically, well, I mean, basically they were damaging my business interests to save their own, and I wasn't very amused about it. But of course, that's exactly what happened to Noel Edmonds, and he's suing Lloyd's at the moment. But it wasn't only Lloyd's that I was with. I was with RBS as well, and with Clydesdale Bank, which is owned by an Australian bank. And they are...
Hold on. They did it to you. 3 banks did the same thing.
Well, I had lots of bank accounts. I've also banked with Coots. And obviously Coots were bought by NatWest, and NatWest became RBS and all that sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, basically, you don't only have, one bank account isn't enough if you're a serious business person. It just isn't. And you use different banks for different things. But after 2008, the banks helped themselves to lots of solvent people's hard work, including my own and several of my friends. That is what happened.
What's going to happen? Are you going to get any of that back?
Well, there's nothing you can really do. I mean, I complained to the ombudsman, but it was too much money, and I would have had to bring a private prosecution. But that's really hard to do because it costs a lot of money, and one, you have to find a lawyer that will do it. I mean, obviously, Noel Edmonds is doing it as a kind of a class action. I mean, he has celebrity on his side. And then, of course, there's the general feeling as well, is that, all rich people have it coming to them. So, I mean, I've never expected any sympathy. I mean, I don't even feel sorry for myself. But they say revenge is a dish best served cold, and I believe that. So, my attitude was, I'll figure out exactly what's happened here, and I will do my best to help other people to avoid the same pitfalls. So that, and eventually I will catch up to these people, and set the gravy train.
Yeah, as a little bit of background, I think I saw a name in the paper today. I'm pretty sure. I don't know if I was looking at old news or new news, but one of them is Sally Masterton, who I think she was working for. She did the report, and they sacked her. They asked her to do a report, and she did the report, and they sacked her for saying that they were doing bad things and what they were doing was wrong. So yeah, it appears that it's exactly the same thing happening at
I mean, it's a matter of record, and I mean, everybody knows that their banks ripped them off. I mean, it's what it is. Most people don't believe there's anything you can do about it, and to a large extent, that's true. Because I mean, the war, the law that's made has been made by and for banks, mainly because they settle the cases that they can't win or look like they're going to lose. Therefore, all the precedents that exist are in favour of the banks. There are some people much braver than me, or more bloody mind. There's a guy called Carling who's suing. They tried to repossess his home. He was a policeman, and he arrested the sheriff in the court in Belfast. Got his warrant card out and said, "I'm arresting you because you're not doing this properly." And ended up serving a prison sentence himself. But he's been interviewed on various programs. There's an interview on The Renegade Economist on RT with him. There's an interview Brian Garish did of him. There are quite a few good ones telling his story. Incredibly.
You know what you were just saying about the precedent. Somebody told me that's called buying precedent.
Yeah, it's the best. The British justice system offers the best justice money can buy. I mean,
it's very similar to what the drug companies do, isn't it? With their research. If it's research that they like, then they fund it and get period.
It's as old as the hill. The old saying was, "The man that has the gold makes the rules." And under fiat currency, it's the person with the first use of fiat currency will always basically dilute everybody else into penury, and that's what happened after 2008.
When people talk about evidence-based medicine, for example, so you can buy the evidence by paying for all the peer review for whatever evidence you want to be called true, and then also as you said, you can settle out of court if you think something's not going to look great, and then if you think something's going to land in your direction, you can lose in style or win in style and have the precedent again. And then,
And then in the coming new age of these super trade deals, like the TTIP and TTP, all of those with the state settlement provisions and the arbitrations and all the rest. That's outside of existing national due process. Basically, the corporations are considered to be far too clever and far too complicated, and therefore you need experts to deal with it. Of course, all the experts know which side their bread is buttered on, and so the states' power and judicial systems within states no longer trouble corporations. The corporations are in charge, and arbitrations between themselves. And there are, instead of legal aid, as an individual being done down by these people, you don't stand a chance. But they even hedge their legal funds on these things. There are actual opportunity funds whereby you can invest in the legal cases brought by these state settlement arbitrations.
Yeah,
that is a thing.
I saw the name of one of them in, I think, the City AM.
Yeah, and they're all based in offshore tax havens, and they're tax investments you can make. I mean, a friend of mine is quite a high-powered. He used to work for Hargreaves Lansdowne, and he knows Hargreaves. He used to work for him before Hargreaves was a billionaire. When he was just a regular millionaire. And of course, he's from Bristol, so I mean, his estate was quite near mine in Bristol. It wasn't as big as mine, but so him. He's part of the Bristol lot, and this friend of mine.
I think it was called Simium Capital, something like that. I mean,
Mm,
in the case.
yeah, that's right. And there are several of them, and they are very good returns.
I was going to
But
say, imagine having to do a credit rating on something like that as investment.
well,
Who do you
I
have
mean,
to hire a lawyer in order to tell you whether or not the probability
when I was told about them, I was absolutely horrified because in law there is the usury, but there's also a thing called champity, and champity is a prohibition on speculating on the outcome of judicial decisions. You're not allowed to invest in that. That's a really old
okay, so that's gone.
old sanction in jurisprudence.
Well,
And that is what that is, you see. It's champity. That's what it is. So, like, ambulance chase is a frowned upon, but that is way worse ambulance chasing.
Yeah, I remember when I was reading the Rise of the World Class Share, talked about derivative cases. So obviously I've heard of derivative products in terms of finance, but they were talking about derivative cases. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was to do with people's stock options. Yeah.
So that's that. So all of this stuff, what you see here is fascism at work. But what you've got is basically rival state monopoly capitalism systems, the Chinese and the Russian, the Iranian, Washington, EU, and the UK, and they're all having a massive row amongst them at the moment.
Roger,
Mhm.
an Iranian acquaintance told me that the people who in Iran are such incompetent thieves that they sell gas to Russia very, very little, and Russia then sell that gas to Europe for a markup. And China, the way they take gas off Iran, they don't even give them any money. They just give them chocolate, which apparently.
Yeah, but the point is, money is worthless, Ranjan. I mean, the dollar is worthless. It's an idea. It's a token, and therefore, if you can actually settle your oil contracts by barter, you're actually better off. That's the whole point about the financialized system. It's based on a legal fiction, which is fiat currency. Fiat currency is legal fiction. But gas and oil and minerals and food and land and labor are not legal fictions. They're actual, real, physical stuff. Energy,
But you
work.
can't buy them with money.
Well, but the point is the money is just a placeholder for other stuff. The money itself is worthless. It's not, it's a rain check. That's all it is. And when people think of money as being valuable, money is valuable. The stuff you can actually get in return for the money is what's valuable. It's the stuff as a placeholder until you get the stuff. And the financialized economy is a fiction built on fiction, whereby claims on claims, right? You end up basically with more claims than actual stuff. And what you then get is people with the biggest purse of manufactured claims, okay, end up monopolizing all the stuff from made up money that they haven't earned. There's no skin in the game. And we are at a point of financialized capitalism where the people who hold tokens simply have no skin in the game. They don't value that money because they know it's worthless and that they can always double what they're doing. Now I'll tell you a story which kind of illustrates this point. There's a billionaire known as Kerry Packer Jr. Well, his father, Kerry Packer, was a media mogul in Australia, okay, and into all sorts of.
He invented one-day cricket.
That's right. So anyway, this guy, he's playing. He was a great gambler, and he was playing at some casino, okay, and some Texan sort of, really rich Texan took umbrage at this loud Australian And and so this sort of says, listen, chum, you just shut up and do you know who I am and all this sort of thing. And Packer said to him, he said, that's interesting. He said, how much are you worth? And this guy says, I'm worth about $500 million. And Packer turned around and he said, so I'll flip you for it and then we'll do double or quits. Now, that summed up that pecking order and how ridiculous it all is. I mean, the idea of someone being a billionaire is completely ridiculous. That can only be policed. I mean, it's usurious in the extreme. It goes against all tenets of general fairness and what people can actually achieve. And then we get dynastic wealth and all the rest of it, and political structures supporting that sort of thing, which is what we've got to become institutionalized. It doesn't make any sense. It is an absurdity now. Capitalism or commerce, it's nothing of the sort. We have arrived at a new form of feudalism. We're there. We're not on the road to it. We're there. We've been there we've been there since 2008, effectively, and nothing has changed since 2008. What's beginning to change is actually a solidifying of our serfdom status by people like Extinction Rebellion. That's what they're doing. They're demanding their own serfdom, a serfdom of the rest of us. And they are wrong, they are mistaken, they're wrong-headed, and they are being duped. There are people within that organisation are complicit in the duping. Most of the people that are attracted to that are completely and blissfully unaware of the realities of how the world really works. And they are demanding their own, everybody else's, enslavement to a new form of feudalism. And that's where we're at. And so this 5G is all part of that as well. 5G, we don't need it. If you want to be enslaved, and fried, then yeah, 5G is great. It's exactly what you want. But not many people want either to be enslaved or fried. And you get both with 5G. Frying tonight. And you don't even get the choice of whether you want gravy on your chips or not. Are you still there? It's absolutely crazy. And the point is that what the Americans call Main Street and what we call the real economy or whatever, has been crowded out of the equation. Meanwhile,